New Wave is easily one of the most iconic and epic 80s genres. It was just like the decade itself. Crazy, colorful, wild, full of neon colors and synth beats. New Wave defined the style of the 80s and gave us some of the most iconic songs our brains ever got to experience. Listening to New Wave is a special experience, like being high on hundreds of drugs while swimming through an ocean of neon lights, bottles of hairspray and rivers of synth keyboards. It's a genre that feels like a never-ending party that is unpredictable and out to have a good time. When I think of the 80s, New Wave music instantly pops into my head. What's interesting about New Wave is that the genre originated from punk music. Which is crazy to think about, especially from a modern perspective, since a lot of it sounds more like synth pop and rock than anything else. This because it split away from punk music in the late 70s, with a lot of these bands being more interested in partying, fame, money, and attention. Unlike punk music, which saw mainstream bands and success as selling out and posers, new wave bands wanted to have all of that. They didn't care what the rest of the punk community was thinking or calling them. They wanted to be on TV and on the radio as often as possible. They wanted to be recognized in public. They wanted all of the groupies and drugs that came with success. In that regard, they were very similar to hair metal, and you could make the argument that new wave is basically punk's version of hair metal. As great as a lot of punk music is, it wasn't radio or media friendly in most cases, and bands often had the habit of presenting themselves and acting in very antisocial and inappropriate ways. Which of course made it harder to give them more mainstream attention. It makes sense as to why they did that from the perspective of a genre fan and its philosophy, but that also meant that there wasn't much room for growing. When new wave bands started to emerge, they didn't really care about this punk lifestyle or worldview, but they still wanted to retain the edginess and rebellious attitude of punk. It's why when you listen to a lot of these artists or see some of their live performances, you can see how they carry themselves on stage in a certain way that was closer to how punk bands carry themselves. This was then coupled with the new wave fashion that they introduced, which defined a lot of youth culture back in the 80s, especially in the nightclub scenes. Just like the punks, they had wild hair, dressed outlandish, but also added a certain extravagant and flamboyant attitude that made them stand out. Not all new wave bands did that. In fact, it is often actually pretty difficult to say what can and can't be considered new wave. A band didn't have to look like a flock of seagulls or the Romantics. Some of these artists even had very short hair or were even bald like Bronski Beat. Neither did they have to dress as wild as the Soft Cell or Dead or Alive. They could look like normal everyday guys such as the Police or Men at Work. The genre wasn't as easily defined as hair metal, for example, which had certain requirements to even be considered glam and sleazy. It's also why it's harder to clearly define the genre, as there were a lot of crossovers. A new wave song could be part of that genre while at the same time also be considered rock, pop, funk and even reggae.
Traveling in a Friday combi. Come from a land down under. Yeah. Does it feel
One of the best examples of a new wave band is A Flock of Seagulls. Not only is that band exactly what I would consider part of that style, both musically and visually, but they also heavily influenced the genre. It's sad that they have a reputation of being a one-hit wonder band. If you actually go and listen to their first few albums, you'll notice that they are extremely solid and have a bunch of bangers. Now I'm sure there's a bunch of people just like me in their 20s who know the song and band from GTA Vice City. In fact, when I hear I Ran So Far Away, I instantly think of Vice City because the song has burnt itself into my brain from playing the game so much and listening to Wave 103.
Just listen! I created that just by pressing a button! Synthesizers are the new wave! Why work hard on difficult compositions when a machine can make music better than you've ever dreamed of?
But this band is also a great example of the style that was present within the genre. It was different and rebellious, but at the same time had a certain dandy look. Although, to me, a lot of them looked like some mad scientists experimenting with synth keyboards and guitars, about to drop some of the sickest music anyone ever heard in the 80s. Style has always been an important factor of any genre, even if some people claim it's all about the music and that visuals don't matter, which isn't actually true. Style has always been important because it gives certain genres their own unique look, but also lets fans be able to dress the same way, communicating to the world that they associate with the genre and its subculture. New Wave shaped the look of the early 80s in a massive way, at least when it comes to youth culture. They dressed like rebels, but at the same time embrace the insanity of that decade, which is why a lot of these bands have some of the wildest looks with lots of colorful pastel clothes and hair that clearly shows that size matters. In a way, this new attitude made them extremely punk despite the hate they were getting from that community. Because they did go against the grain, new wave artists decided to do their own thing, not caring about what others think, and try to create music that was new, unheard of, and highly original and experimental. So while it would be a far cry to call songs such as Tainted Love by the Soft Cell punk, for example, it still had its roots within punk. And in many ways, I'd even say that it was more punk than the punk genre because they didn't care about the claim of selling out. I mean, this has been an issue within the rock community for a long time now. And when I say rock, I mean all genres of rock, including metal. There is a lot of insane gatekeeping going on, as well as people and bands being insulted as posers because they got big or very successful. It's this attitude that caused the downfall of the genre from the mainstream because it simply stopped evolving and innovating. Anytime a band comes along that tries to do things differently, they get insulted and hated on. With new wave, these bands were open to change, and by trying to change their old genre, they pretty much created a new one that had massive dominance in the 80s. One of the best examples of a perfect new wave song is Sunglasses at Night by Corey Hart. I mean, that song just defines not only the entire genre, but also the 80s. In fact, I will go so far and say that this song and its music video is the most 80s thing I have ever seen in my life. It also defines perfectly what the genre was all about at its peak. You've got an insane dose of neon colors literally everywhere in the video. Corey is wearing a white shirt with his chest open, slim leather pants, and of course the most retro sunglasses at night. Not to mention the strong and extremely prominent synth beats that are all over the song, mixed with a rock heavy guitar. Listening to this song is like taking a trip to 1983 in Doc Brown's DeLorean. It's that good and iconic. This song is also a good example of how diverse new wave as a genre was, in the sense that a song could have strong rock music elements and influences, while at the same time be strongly dominated by synth beats. But also, there were plenty of songs that were almost entirely made up of synths and pop sounds, but still considered part of the genre. It also means that a lot of the new wave artists and bands could easily be described as pure rock bands or pop bands or funk bands, etc. It wasn't as strict as it is for other types of music, and this diversity allowed the genre to change its sound all the time and create some really iconic and memorable songs.
Pick it up. Take me back home, man.
Also, at this point I really need to mention how I can't be the only one who thinks that the guitar part of Your Love by The Outfield just sounds so similar to Summer of '69. As a kid I always mixed them up, but I love them both equally, especially Your Love.
Coming soon on cable, your stereo and TV unite to bring you video music in stereo 24 hours a day.
You better run! You better run! Turn it's just the
MTV Music Television in stereo. You'll never look at music the same way again.
There was a lot of wild and crazy music around in the 80s because the decade itself was unlike anything that came before. Not only did it have the biggest diversity when it came to artists, bands and genres, it was also all about partying and bright colors. Everything felt new and fresh. One such new event was MTV. It smashed into the 80s with extreme force and ended up defining the whole decade as well as the music tastes of millions. MTV was extremely influential in popularizing various genres, but it's because of them that new wave really burnt itself into people's brains and went viral. Literally, as one of the early songs and music videos that they played was I Ran from a Flock of Seagulls, which broke records. It received heavy rotation on MTV and can be considered one of the first videos to really go viral, as it was everywhere. To show this MTV impact even more, one of the very first songs that they played in their first episode was Video Killed the Radio Star.
Video killed the radio star.
A new wave defining song that not only started off the decade for new wave, but also described the truth and how radio was dying. MTV changed the way people saw music and interacted with it, and they also popularized the concept of music videos. They did exist even before MTV, but bands or singers didn't really film them that often, and when they did, the videos were nothing special. In the 80s, thanks to MTV, this changed and music videos started to become wilder and wilder, telling stories and trying to be as immersive as possible. New wave was amongst the first genres that heavily invested into their music videos, experimenting with all sorts of visuals, which is why they also ended up feeling out of the ordinary and like it was from another planet.
Two kinds of people in this world. So how good insane. How does it feel? I'm waking up to fantasy when you and everyone when you. Won't you come see about me? Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. To whip it good. Keep me burning for your love.
But it wasn't just MTV that was influencing the popularity of the genre. At the time, a lot of new wave songs were used in movies and TV shows, most notably Miami Vice. In fact, it's due to Miami Vice that you started hearing contemporary music in TV shows in general. Miami Vice had a reputation of using a lot of modern music, not just new wave, but pretty much any genre they deemed fitting for whatever episode or scene they needed it for. It was a cultural phenomenon, and many bands and musicians were actively trying to get featured on the show. It's why it was originally even called MTV Cops due to its strong MTV-like vibe.
I trusted you, God, I trusted you, you bastard! I trusted you! I can feel it coming in the air tonight.
What's interesting about new wave is that it didn't just originate from punk music, it also mixed and merged with a lot of club and electronic music. The clubbing scene was highly influential, and a lot of famous bands within the genre started off playing in clubs such as Duran Duran or ABC. But what a lot of people don't know is how big the gay influence on new wave in the 80s in general was. I mean, a lot of 80s aesthetics are just straight up gay as hell, no matter whether the artists themselves identified as such or not. Just look at the hair metal scene, where feminine clothes, drag and makeup were popular, yet the bands themselves were usually extremely straight and all about women. Within new wave, a great example of such bands would be Bronski Beat, The Soft Cell, Frankie Goes Hollywood, Dead or Alive, or Wham! There were others, of course, but these were among the most prominent ones with some of the biggest hits. New wave will forever be one of the most legendary and amazing genres in my opinion. It changed the way we view music and also defined a whole decade.
Young teacher, the subject of schoolgirl fantasy.